What is the most Australian thing that you do?
I say mate all of the time. When I first came here, people would talk to you at the cafe and say mate, the barista or the person working at the desk. And I'd be like, why are we saying mate 5 times in the same sentence? And now, especially at work, because I feel like it's just what people expect you to do when you're working with other people or dealing with clients. It's also kind of an effective thing where if you say mate, you can use different inflections. So if I say mate, that means like you're doing something wrong. Mate is kind of like the breaking the ice. If I want to talk to somebody whose name I don't know, it's a funny Australian quirk, like 15 different versions of the same word with different tone is very Australian as well.
Welcome to the very first episode of Timtams or Timbits on the Just Hit Play Network. I'm your host, Peter. I thought I would start with an explanation on the idea of this show. I'm originally from Canada, but I've been living in Australia for almost 20 years. My time here has been both wonderful and tragic. I've met a lot of other expats, and we all have an interesting story to tell. I thought I would interview a bunch of people and hear their Australian story. First up is Braden Mutch, a friend I've known for a few years who's from Miramichi, New Brunswick, Canada. He also wrote the theme song for Timtams or Timbits, so stick around to the end of the episode to hear that. I'm going to make a cup of coffee, have a biscuit, and let's start the first episode of Timtams or Timbits. Hey Braden, welcome to episode 1 of Timtams or Timbits. How you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So how long have we known each other now? It's been, 5 years since I've known you?
Yeah. Honestly, I'm terrible with numbers.
Yeah.
But yeah, probably I was in Chermside, so that's at least 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Probably more.
We knew each other before then.
Yeah.
So I think we met there's a Facebook group called Canadians in Brisbane. And that's how we met, was on that page. And we found out that we lived sort of really close to each other, and we ended up having coffee and just became friends.
We probably sat beside each other at the coffee shop without noticing.
Yeah. There was a local cafe that we used to go to a lot. And then, and you thankfully recorded our intro for our Just Hit Play podcast that I do with my nephew, Nick. So thank you very much for that. I don't know if I've ever thanked you properly, but that's much appreciated. We really love that song.
No, that's great. You know what? I was happy to have anybody use the song. It's one of my favorite songs, but yeah, it hasn't really gone. I haven't really put it out, so you did me a favor as well.
Yeah, cool. So the reason for this podcast, I thought it'd be really interesting to hear people's stories. Obviously I've been living in Australia for 20 years, and I really wanted to hear different people's stories of what brought them to Australia and what their, and what their experience is like living in Australia. So I've come up with a series of questions, all scientifically proven to reveal the person that you are. And let's go. We're going to let's find out a little bit more about Braden.
Okay. I feel very qualified for this interview.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So please give us your name, age, and where in Canada you're from.
Yep. My name is Braden Mutch. I am 43 years old, and I'm from originally the Miramichi, New Brunswick, which is Atlantic, Canada.
Hey there, it's Peter from the future. I'm going to be jumping in and giving some context on things that Braden has said. Miramichi is the largest city in northern New Brunswick. It has a fascinating history of early Canadian settlements and in the French and Indian Wars of 1754s. Of an estimated 14,100 Acadians, approximately 11,500 were deported, of whom 5,000 died of disease, starvation, and shipwrecks. Their lands were given to loyal Scottish settlers. A significant number of those who were deported to Britain and France would then migrate to Spanish Louisiana, where the Acadians eventually became Cajuns. There's a huge amount of Irish immigrants in Miramichi, and the Irish began arriving in 1815 at the end of the Napoleonic Wars. Fishing and shipbuilding were the main industries in Miramichi from the late 1700s, which in modern times was replaced with pulp and paper production. But if you ask someone from Miramichi what is the city known for, they will tell you Marilyn Monroe spent a week secretly fishing there, which has not been proven, but her whereabouts at this time of her secret trip remains a mystery, so it's very plausible she was fishing on the shores of Miramichi River. The legend states she arrived unannounced in October 1955 dressed as a boy and stayed at a local fishing lodge in Blackville owned by Paul O'Hare to quietly fish for Atlantic salmon.
When did you move to Australia? Do you remember what year you moved to Australia?
2017.
Let's take a minute to see what was happening in Australia in 2017. Australia voted yes in the historical national same-sex marriage postal survey, leading to legal equality by December. Nationally, the Turnbull government handed down its federal budget in May. Victoria legalized voluntary assisted dying, and Roger Federer won the men's singles title at the 2017 Australian Open in Melbourne. Severe tropical cyclone Debbie hit Australia on March 28, 2017 as a powerful Category 4 system as it made landfall near Airlie Beach on the Whitsunday coast in Queensland. And as most Australians would say,
"Fuck you, Debbie!"
And where in Australia do you live? What's that like?
Yeah, I'm currently north of Brisbane in the suburbs, somewhere between Brisbane and the Sunshine Coast. So it's a bit more rural than most of the suburbs. There's horses and farms and everything. Yeah, and we're pretty close to the beach, so I'm like 20 minutes from the beach.
One of the great things about living in Australia is we're never too far away from the beach. So when you moved here in 2017, what was the reason why you moved to Australia?
Yes, well, there's a few reasons. My wife is Australian, and I met her in Vancouver. And it was partly due to romantic reasons, and also, I was in Toronto previous to that for about 5 years, and cost of living was going up. And I wasn't getting paid very well for living in the CBD. And the money was just the type of, even when I first came here 2014, just for like a trip, probably for a month. So obviously we're traveling a lot. So it's very exciting, and you're partying and you're seeing all these cool places, and you're like, oh, and it was the middle of winter in Canada. So I'd come to this other place that's sunny, and it wasn't the complete hot season as well. So I think, I was tricked a little bit.
Yeah, the summers here are something else. The heat and humidity is just awful. It's a big culture shock to most Canadians when they move here, especially since most of the homes, for some reason, do not have air conditioning. I must say, whenever I move, I make sure that I have air conditioning in the new house. That being said, the winters here in Queensland are just perfect, low of 12°C, and a high on most days of 24, just perfect. Don't come here in the summer.
Because I didn't experience the full Queensland humid heat. But it was more of a practical reason. The wages are quite high here compared to Canada.
Australia's minimum wage is a lot higher than in Canada's. We roughly sit at about $26 an hour compared to Canada, which is between $17 and $18 per hour. Australia provides a much higher statutory minimum annual leave than in Canada. If you're a full-time Australian, you'll get a minimum of 4 weeks or 20 days of paid leave per year, where in Canada, it starts at 2 weeks. It might increase to 3 weeks if you've been with the company for several years. For instance, I was at the Royal Bank of Canada for over 10 years. If I took my annual leave in the summer, I would get 2 weeks. If I took it off season, I could get 3 weeks. So Canada, not as good as Australia.
So I did it was a mathematical equation a little bit, but it was also, I try to be open-minded to new things just to see how it's going to go, I guess. And the greater vacation you have, 4 weeks off in Australia a year, where Canada was 2 weeks off, and I was working, I'd get on call as well every few months as part of my job. So I'd have to go out on the weekends, and even over Christmas, sometimes you'd be on call the whole time on your Christmas holidays. So we're looking for cheaper houses, work-life balance. This it's just typical middle-class stuff. You wanted a house, you wanted a car. I think we're settling down a bit. We're looking for a different lifestyle. So, that's about it.
All right. So if anyone was to visit you from Canada, Where is the place you're taking them to explore? Where are you taking them to?
Where am I taking them? It's a good question. I would say Sunshine Coast, just the beaches, like Coolum. My wife's from Coolum. It's just a little surf town. You know, you can see turtles. You've got coffee by the beach. The surf club is right on the beach there. The food is amazing. And you're just, eating and drinking on a patio, looking at the ocean coming in.
I can attest to Coolum being amazing. I've taken a few Canadians to Coolum. Amazing beaches that feel wild, but with surf lifeguards. And great relaxed places for lunch, coffee, dinner. It's one of Australia's hidden gems.
I mean, there's 7 other places I could probably take them that are similar as well. But yeah, that's, to me, is sort of the Australian experience. What you could get somewhere else. I mean, we could also go to Uluru, which would be a pretty big change from what they're used to. Or another place I'd recommend is the Daintree. So that's quite far from where we are now in Brisbane, but it's just the Great Barrier Reef. There's crocodiles in the rivers. It's just such a change from what you're used to as a Canadian.
The Daintree, the oldest rainforest in the world. It's around 180 million years old. These ancient, self-sustaining forests are nearly 100 million years older than the Amazon of South America. And it's named after photographer and geologist Richard Daintree.
And there's like giant birds. And yeah, probably the Daintree if we had the money, or just Sunshine Coast if we didn't have the money, basically.
What is the most Australian thing that you do?
I say mate all of the time. When I first came here, people would talk to you at the cafe and say mate, the barista or the person working at the desk. And I'd be like, why are we saying mate 5 times in the same sentence? And now, especially at work, because I feel like it's just what people expect you to do when you're working with other people or dealing with clients. It's also kind of an effective thing where if you say mate, you can use different inflections. So if I say mate, that means like you're doing something wrong. Mate is kind of like the breaking the ice. If I want to talk to somebody whose name I don't know, it's a funny Australian quirk, like 15 different versions of the same word with different tone is very Australian as well.
What is the most Canadian thing that you still do?
Canadian thing. It's hard to say. I still hold my thoughts inside, I think. I'm polite and I don't keep my emotions in check. I'd say a little bit is more Canadian, depending on who you talk to. But yeah, I keep my thoughts inside. I think Australians are very vocal. Kind of whatever they feel comes out quickly, where I hold it. And that could be my parents and my upbringing, but also I think it's more Canadian. You're kind of stone-faced, friendly, but not really showing all your cards,
A well-known Canadian cultural habit of saying sorry and keeping social harmony and avoiding public arguments. It's very typical Canadian.
The best experience about living in Australia, I mean, having children and being married and sort of watching the kids grow up, which could have happened anywhere, I suppose, but it's been in Australia. And I think the weather, like I'm wearing shorts and it's winter, supposedly winter.
Let's go over this again. The winters are the best here in Brisbane. The average temperature, low of 12, high of 24, all winter.
So just not having to deal with the car, having to change the tires, having to drive in downtown Toronto in icy conditions with everybody, about 5 centimeters away from your bumper, wondering if they're going to come through your back window when you stop. And that's been much better.
What has been the hardest thing about living in Australia?
The hardest thing for me would be people dying or people getting sick. My father Father's been unhealthy, like had some health issues for years. Definitely I've had two friends die at different times. One died in the last few months. And I hadn't been in that great of contact with him, but I had seen him in Toronto again.
I think this will come up time and time again. Being so far away from home and having a family member get sick can be crippling. I think this might be a running theme for this show.
A few years ago when I was, or like more than a few years ago when I was in Toronto. But he was a friend from childhood, so, and I've lost touch with a lot of people, so I think that's hard. It's a natural thing, you know. Most of my best friends don't even live in my hometown anymore. They've moved, so it's just the way we are. But yeah, I think not being there for weddings, funerals, and, you know, people having kids, like nephews and nieces I've never seen. I would say that's the hardest part.
Has there ever been a moment where you sort of looked around and you sort of thought to yourself, how the hell did I end up in this place?
Yeah, definitely. That happens all the time. I think the most intense feeling of that was before I'm kind of settled now. I have a house. I work for do trades work for one of the clients, and they're relatively close to my area. Like I'm working for the same council that I live in, essentially. So I'm settled. But before this, I was working in New South Wales, which is fairly large state, but it's about 4 hours from where I live now. And I was working away a week at a time. And there was forest fires happening. It was probably one of Australia's worst events. It was called Black Summer.
Black Summer refers to the catastrophic 2019-2020 Australian bushfire season. These numbers are unbelievable. It burned 17 million hectares, destroyed more than 3,000 homes, and resulted in 33 direct deaths alongside an estimated 3 billion animals killed or displaced. Driven by severe drought and record high temperatures, these fires heavily impacted New South Wales, Victoria, and South Australia.
I'm sure you've heard of it. It was a few years ago. And I was working in the middle of this field that they just cleared this land. And there was fires around me. And I was looking at the app because you could see where the fires were. And the wind actually was blowing heat as well because it was a hot wind. And my brain just went like, what is going on? You know, and I looked around and I saw totally different mountains, trees that made no sense. I had no concept of where I was located in terms of direction because it's the middle of nowhere. And I just thought, what am I doing? You know, why have I moved so far away? And to work in the middle of a field building a giant prison for the government, you know, and I didn't know anybody. I knew a few people down there, but yeah, that was a huge moment. The fire thing was very stressful, and fire is a season in Australia. For those of you who don't know it, it's generally a thing that happens every year. You just have a big fire outbreak somewhere, but that was profound. I think that just totally isolated and yeah, huge difference.
What surprises you the most about Australia? It could be its politics, its culture, or anything that springs to mind. So what surprises you the most about Australia?
I think it's the fact that it's not that hard to really talk to people on a daily basis. Because I'm English speaking, Canadians are also very popular here. It's kind of like being a weird celebrity that it's not really a real celebrity.
Are Canadians exotic in Australia? Let's look at the numbers. Canadians make up approximately 0.17 to 0.22, not 1% or 2%, but 0.17, 0.22 of Australia's total population. There are roughly 61,310 Canadian-born residents living in Australia. Australia has a population of 27.6 million people. Canadians represent a very small fraction of the country's demographic makeup.
But yeah, I'm kind of like exotic, which is really funny because, you know, someone asks you every day, where are you from? Or I have an accent now. But yeah, it surprises me. I think that I would be sort of stand out, and that, yeah, people are also quite friendly here, even in the cities. People let you out in traffic, which is a huge change from Toronto. You know, if you need to get out, you can just wait there. You might not have a traffic light, but eventually somebody will let you out, and that doesn't happen. And definitely, it happens on the East Coast, but not so much in Toronto. So that's a big surprise. The ease of the traffic, and also being like a weird type of celebrity, I think.
So you recently went back to Canada for a quick family vacation. What did the Canadians make fun of you for saying or doing that was very quintessential Australian that you were surprised they made fun of you of?
I don't think they picked up on it because they did say something about an accent, but I switch. I'm a chameleon, so I think I switched modes, you know. So it was mostly the snake thing.
The snake thing Braden is talking about is a common misconception that there's a snake around every corner here in Australia. Okay, that might be partly true. I've had many snakes in my garage. I've seen many snakes in my backyard, but mostly they are the carpet python variety, which is non-venomous. Just don't let it wrap around your neck and you're fine. I've only ever seen a couple of red-bellied black snakes and one eastern brown. Those are the two snakes you don't want to mess with.
But it was mostly misconception. There wasn't anything that I did. I don't think that because I changed gears and I'm such a chameleon. Yeah, there wasn't anything particular.
If you were to move back to Canada, where would you move? Where would you live if you moved back?
I couldn't. It's hard to say because I've lived in so many different places in Canada, or three. I've lived in the center, the east, and the west. I would probably move East Coast because my family's there, and the houses are so cheap.
What is the biggest difference between Australian and Canadians? And in retrospect, what is the biggest similarity between Canadians and Australians?
Yes, I would say the biggest difference, I think Australia is a British assimilated kind of place. Its news comes from the British. Its comedy is British. You know, there's a reference to British, and they don't really have the North American connection that Canada has with the US. So I think Canada, I would say, is more American.
This is very true. Growing up in Canada, we get most of our TV and movies from the States. I did love PBS and watch some British shows, Dave Allen at Large, Monty Python, Peep Show. So there are a few in there, but mostly American shit.
Or definitely the television shows, the art, and the media is, you know, where Australians have really come from British shows and British soap operas. Canadians have come from American shows and soap operas. I mean, I didn't watch a lot of soap operas, but music as well. I don't know most of the popular music that my wife liked growing up. I have very little of it I'm even familiar with, you know, and I'm a musician, so I kind of pride myself and take a special interest in music. There's a band called Powderfinger. I didn't know them. Obviously, AC/DC, you know, I knew.
Powderfinger, beloved Brisbane band. Formed in 1989, named after a Neil Young song. Had a 2-decade career yielding 5 number 1 albums, 18 ARIA awards, massive Australian rock anthems before splitting up. And one of the members used to visit the same Blockbuster store that I used to go to when I first moved here in Australia. And I have no idea what he looked like.
Yeah, I think it's just the sports and the media and the things you grew up with are so different. Even though they're the same language, it's like another universe.
What advice would you give to someone who's thinking about moving to Australia?
That's tough. I had a friend who was from Ireland who moved to Canada, and he always told me, he said it takes 1 year to get used to a new city and 3 years to get used to a new country. And I think that's the advice I would say.
And the hardest question of them all, Timtams or Timbits? What are you choosing?
Oh, I'm allergic to wheat, but I don't even eat Timbits. Timbits. It would have to be Timbits.
It's just the iconic. We grew up on Timbits. It's the iconic thing,
Yeah,
isn't it?
familiar.
And you wrote the theme song for this podcast. So tell us what the theme song's about.
The same theme song is just a comparison between it's sort of all the things you bottle up, I think, when you move, like, and you think, like I used to snowboard in the mountains when I lived in Vancouver, and then you think, oh, it was only an hour away, or I could fly and do it. If I lived in Toronto, you could fly out, and you kind of realize that you can't just do that anymore. It's extremely expensive. So it's more of a comparison between what you had and what you lost and what you have now, and trying to look at the positives, I would say.
Yeah, thank you so much. And here is the full version of the song that Braden has recorded for this podcast. And if you're listening to this and you want to be interviewed for Timtams or Timbits, please send us a message, get in touch, and we'll be sure to get you involved in an interview. Braden, thank you so much for being our first guest on our first ever episode of Timtams or Timbits. Much appreciated.
Thank you. It was great.
Timtams or Timbits, rugby or hockey, I swam at your beaches, I miss the Rockies. Always get homesick come December. Haven't forgotten you, do you remember?